Kunja Bihari Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Yamuna Tiravanachari Jayo Radha Madhava Jayo Kunja Bihari Jayo Radha Madhava Jayo Kunja Bihari Jayo Radha Shama Sundar Radha Shama Sundar Shri Radhe Jayo Radha Shama Sundar Radha Shama Sundar Shri Radhe Jayo Jayo Prabhupada 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 Jayo Jayo Prabhupada. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Good morning, welcome. We are meeting today to discuss on continuing the discussion on third canto, chapter 25, verse 33. We'll start with some prayers. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Cheva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudirayet Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Ruttama Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Shranvata Swakataha Krishna Punyashravana Kirtanaha Ridantastoya Badhrani Vidunoti Suhrit Satam. We are reading from Canto 3, the status quo, chapter 25, Glories of Devotional Service, verse 33. Jarayati asu yakosham nigirnam analo yatha. Once again, the verse. Jarayati asu vairagyam. Sorry. Jarayati asu yakosham nigirnam analo yatha. Once again. Jarayati asu yakosham nigirnam yanalo yatha. Synonyms. Jarayati, dissolves. Asu, quickly. Ya, which. Kosham, the subtle body. Nigirnam, things eaten. Analaha, fire. Yatha, as. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Abhayachara Aravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Translation. Bhakti, devotional service, dissolves the subtle body of the living entity without separate effort, just as fire in the stomach digests all that we eat. Purport. Bhakti is in a far higher position than mukti, because a person's endeavor to get liberation from the material engagement is automatically served in devotional service. The example is given here that the fire in the stomach can digest whatever we eat. If the digestive power is sufficient, then whatever we can eat will be digested by the fire in the stomach. Similarly, a devotee does not have to try separately to attain liberation. That very service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the process of his liberation, because to engage oneself in the service of the Lord is to liberate oneself from material entanglement. Sri Bilwamangala Thakura explained his position very nicely. He said, "If I have unflinching devotion unto the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, then mukti or liberation serves me as my maidservant. Mukti, the maidservant, is always ready to do whatever I ask. For a devotee, liberation is no problem at all. Liberation takes place without separate endeavor. Bhakti is therefore far better than mukti, or the impersonalist position. The impersonalists undergo severe penances and austerities to attain mukti, but the bhakta, simply by engaging himself in the bhakti process, especially in chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, immediately develops control over the tongue by engaging it in chanting and by accepting the remnants of foodstuff offered to the personality of Godhead. As soon as the tongue is controlled, naturally, all other senses are controlled automatically. Sense control is the perfection of the yoga principle, and one's liberation begins immediately as soon as he engages himself in the service of the Lord. It is confirmed by Kapila Deva that bhakti or devotional service is gariyasi, more glorious than siddhi, liberation. We'll once again do the translation. Continue the discussion. Translation. Bhakti, devotional service, dissolves the subtle body of the living entity without separate effort, just as fire in stomach digests all that we eat. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Namam Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Welcome to the Saturday discussion of Srimad Bhagavatam. Sorry, my throat is slightly off, so I seek your apologies in the beginning. So we are starting. So the previous verse, which is the 32nd verse, was the beginning of the answers that Kapila Dev, like, just to set the context. We are all discussing this on an everyday basis, but for those devotees who might be joining after a long time, we are in that discussion where Mother Huti has asked her questions to Kapila Dev after um, Kardamu Muni has left the house. Then Mother Devoti kind of walks into Kapila Dev and asks certain questions. So beginning from the previous words, Kapila Dev is starting to answer the various. It's like the similar pattern that we see across Bhagavatam. A devotee asks the question, and then another personality responds to those questions, starting from the first canto almost till the 12th canto. So here, Mother Devoti has asked her questions, and Kapila Dev is now responding back, which Srila Prabhupada helps us understand is the basis of the Sankhya philosophy. And our acharyas tell that the present, so starting from this verse, is actually answering the question that Mother Devoti has asked in the verse 28. The question states that once that Kapiladev says that, oh, all you have to do is perform devotional service, then Mother Devati asks, okay, there might be multiple varieties of devotional service. So she says, what kind of devotional service do I practice that will help me to achieve your lotus feet easily? So in some ways, in our modern terminology, it's like she wanted the quick and she wanted the Google Maps route, which can take her with the most efficient fuel and the most efficient time. So she's asking, okay, there are various ways of devotional service. So tell me the way that I can practice and follow that will ultimately help me achieve you easily. So she's kind of, the conclusion is clear, achieving the Lord. Now that the conclusion is clear that I need to achieve you, what is it that I need to perform? And it's interesting that she's asking the same person. She's already achieved him, right? Like if you think it from just the story standpoint, she's sitting right in front of him, but she still wants to know it. It goes back again to the same story that Srila Prabhupada many times tells, that a mosquito might be on the spiritual master's body, but the mosquito is not the closest to the spiritual master. The disciple who is serving the mission of the spiritual master is the closest. So similarly, even the mother who devotee is in that physical proximity, right, sitting right in front of Kapila Dev, who is this ultimately the same person that she wants to achieve. She's still asking, okay, tell me the process that I can achieve you. So it's more of an internal process that she's saying, where I can ultimately be in that mood of service. So as we read the purport, Srila Prabhupada kind of discusses multiple points in the purport, but we wanted to take couple of points from the purport and kind of expand on it. One is the the entire, I think Prabhupada also distributed the purport. The first para is predominantly on discussing the differentiation of bhakti and mukti, or to put it slightly differently, the prominence of bhakti as compared to mukti. So when we speak of such language, Prabhupada also kind of clarifies that in in I think in one of the purport, in one of the lines, Prabhupada, in the second para, the beginning, Prabhupada says, bhakti is therefore far better than mukti, or the impersonalist position. Um, Many times it's kind of debated either within, might be just the devotees, or in a broader context of the Vedic practitioners. Sometimes when our acharyas tell that bhakti is far greater than mukti, there's this confusion or a kind of debate that happens, that how can you even compare bhakti and mukti? uh, because both are so intertwined, right? Um, you might want to achieve mukti or not, but you're following the process of bhakti. But what Prabhupada, when he's discussing about the differentiation, or the position of bhakti being higher, far higher than mukti, Prabhupada is giving the mukti that is being spoken here is with the context of the impersonalist position, where the goal of mukti in this case, or the liberation, is to achieve becoming merged with the Brahman, or becoming the impersonalist aspect, where it could be just the Brahman aspect, or it could be where the Mayavad aspect of where I am that Brahman, and all I need is the process of bhakti that I need in actually the teachings of Lord Kapila book, when Prabhupada is kind of expanding on this, he also speaks about this. He says many times people might think that I just need to perform this process of devotional service to ultimately realize that I am that Brahman. And once I realize that I am that Brahman, then I don't need that. As Prabhupada explains, it's like taking the assistance of spiritual master as a step ladder. And once we achieve the position where we want to achieve, we just discard the ladder. So that's the context of mukti that Prabhupada is referring here. So in that context of bhakti and mukti, bhakti far supersedes the position of mukti, and Prabhupada kind of goes on to explain. So we'll just slightly spend some time on this, and then we'll go back again to the core point that's being discussed in this verse, which is the digestive system and the correlation of digestive system to the process of devotional service. So when we speak of bhakti, the idea is as Prabhupada helped us understand, is the devotional service. So it's completely anytime there is a reference of, especially in Srimad Bhagavatam, the reference of bhakti comes, it's with that idea that it is completely free from the idea of personal satisfaction. In to put it in a slightly different way, it's the purest form of expression of surrendering everything that we have, including that of free will. And why do we say so is, if we kind of go back to the Sikshashtaka that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given us, there are two verses. Like it's completely, as we know, is 8 verses, but just on this specific point, there are 2 verses. It starts with that न धनं न जनं न सुन्दरीं कवितां वा जगदीश कामये मम जन्मनि जन्मनीश्वरे भवतात् भक्तिरहैतुकी त्वयि अयि नन्दतनुजा किङ्करं पतितं मां विषमे भवाम्बुधौ कृपया तव पादपङ्कज स्थितधूलिसदृशं विचिन्तया. So it starts with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu kind of is instructing it, is the position of bhakti starts with na dhanam, na janam, na sundarim, kavitam, va jagadisha kamaye. Oh Jagadish, I don't have desire, I don't have kama, I don't have desire of neither the money nor the people around me, nor the beauties, or even like this great poetry. But all I want is this Hayatuki, which is, as we understand from Srimad Bhagavatam, which doesn't, like, there's no specific reason or hetu. When we say of hetu is basically, hetu is there is some reason or a logical explanation or some kind of cause for doing that. But what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is saying here is Mama Janmani Janmanishware, birth after birth. It's not that he's saying that, okay, now I want to perform this devotional service of bhakti, Hayatuki bhakti, for this lifetime, and at the end of this lifetime, just get me free of this whole circus of what I'm trying to do here. But that's not Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is saying. Mama Janmani Janmanishwari is life after life, life after life. All I want to do is just perform this devotional service. And that too, Bhavatat Bhaktir Ahituki Tvai. Tvai, your devotional service, I just want to perform this Ahituki Bhakti. And then he follows that with saying, Ainanda Tanuja Kinkaram. So this is quite an interesting word, Kinkara. So there are various Sanskrit, as we all understand, is such a um, for that matter, any language, one specific word could be referenced with. There are multiple synonyms, right? In Sanskrit or the language that I am from, Telugu, we call it as pratipadardam. So for a single word, there could be multiple words. So when we say of kinkara, in many ways it's kind of translated as being a servant, but there are other synonyms also for servant, which is sevak or dasa or multiple things. But the specific word that it's used here, kinkara, is it's actually divided into two words, which is kim and karaha. Karaha is I'm ready to do, and kim is whatever is being asked of me. So is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is saying here, I nanda tanuja kinkaram. I'm your kinkara. And why? All I want is, because I'm your kinkara, patita mam vishame bhavam budau. I'm here, but what I'm seeking is kripaya tava pada pankaja stita dhuli sadrisham vichintaya. He's not asking here of liberation or anything much higher. All he's saying is, I just need the shelter of your lotus feet. And we all also understand from if we kind of expand this slightly further into the pastimes of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when Haridas Thakur was during the Mahaprakash Leela, where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was actually in very rare instances where he was displaying his opulence as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is asking for all the devotees what they want. And when Haridas Thakur's chance comes, he says, "Oh, I want to be a servant of your devotee." And then he says, "No, no, no, how can you even ask that? All I want to be is just a dog in front of the house of a devotee, so I can just eat their remnants." So it's of that position. When we say of bhakti, it's like completely free of what my satisfaction. It's like surrendering everything that we have. It's an expression of surrendering everything. Mm. In many ways, we understand that the only thing that we have is the ability to do free, is to make a free will. Everything else is the property of the Lord. Like even ourselves is the property of the Lord, but the Lord so mercifully provides us with this one thing that we can, if we can call it our own thing that we actually own, it's the ability of taking our own decisions, whether um, if moment by moment ability of making that free decision through the bliss of the through the blessing that Krishna has given us in the form of free will. But bhakti, as we understand in the highest expression of bhakti, as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is also presenting here, and as Jay, which is, if we see the stories through the Srimad Bhagavatam or through the Vedic literatures or outside of Srimad Bhagavatam, just the day-to-day lives of many devotees that we know, it's that expression of surrendering even the free will. In the case of, if you just take the example of Jay Vijaya, um, I still get baffled that how can somebody, some servant, be okay, like we kind of, it baffles us with the understanding that the Lord wanted to kind of enjoy this Veera Rasa, where he wanted to kind of have this exchange of fight. And just because of that desire that the Lord had, the whole pastime was orchestrated where Kumaras came in, Jai Vijaya did something that they were not supposed to do, or they were supposed to do it. It's like we have went through the section. There are certain acharyas say Jai Vijaya was right, there are certain acharyas say Kumaras are right. So it's like either they did they were supposed to do, they did something they were not supposed to do for whatever reason. Ultimately, Lord says it just happened because I wanted it to happen, and it's baffling. There's no logical explanation that you can give. It just is Jay Vijaya are okay because they surrendered their free will. If Lord wants it, we are here to satisfy anything that the Lord wants. If the Lord's satisfaction means that we step out of this Vaikunta and be in this horrible body of even in that position of, like, imagine of being a personality from Vaikunta who's considered more softer than even the softest material that we can think of, and such a personality becomes Hiranyakashipu and is torturing his own son. Like, the contrast is as extreme as it can be, right? Is here is Jay Vijay, and then here is Hiranyakashipu, or here is Ravana, from the position of worshipping Mother Sita as their own mother, more precious than their own lives, coming to this position of Ravana where you're trying to exploit that same mother that you worshipped more than your life. The contrast, the only explanation is because they've just surrendered their free will at the lotus feet of the Lord, saying that, oh my dear Lord, if this is what you want, we are okay to do it. And that's the bhakti position that Srila Prabhupada is talking here. And like, if you kind of even just might be a mundane comparison, but something that we can all relate. Like, even in our day-to-day life, if we kind of understand that every work that each of us do is important. Either it be like in a family, right? Every person has a specific role, say so in the society. But there is a certain respect, certain aspects of profession gets, like somebody who is in military. There's a certain aspect, there's a certain respect and awe and reference that is given to them by every person of the community. It is just because of the selfless surrender that they're trying to do, just being that position. So similarly, might be a mundane comparison, but bhakti is also that selfless surrender of everything that we have, of including our free will. And from that position, the highest expression of bhakti, as we understand from the Chaitanya Shikshastrika and from the lives of the devotees, that's the bhakti that Srila Prabhupada is discussing here. So such bhakti, there's nothing to compare that bhakti with, neither it be mukti or anything, because the core need, if we kind of break it down, as we just discussed, the core need of bhakti in the case of Jai Vijaya is just their willingness to serve the Lord. And in the same way, if we break it down, the mukti also, the core need is to kind of just get free from the entanglement, the material entanglement that we have. the core need in that way is the self-satisfaction that we were kind of seeking. Okay, I'm just fed up with whatever I have. I want to get rid of this and then go. But in the case of bhakti, as in the case of that we have seen in the case of Jai Vijaya or Prahlad Maharaj or Vasudev Datta, so many, right? Everybody are praying that if it is pleasing you, my Lord, I'm ready to take birth after birth. But whoever are here, whatever mercy that I have in my command, whatever mercy of yours that I have in my command, please take it away and then distribute it to everybody so everybody can go back to your shelter in to back to Godhead. But I'm ready to be here life after life. We see that in multiple lives. We see that in the prayers of Prahlad Maharaj. We see that in the prayers of Vasudeva Datta. We see that in the prayers of multiple others, like Ramanujacharya. He's ready to when the mantra was given, when the mantra was given to him by his spiritual master, he goes on top of this big shikara, which big temple tower, and he starts shouting that, and then he says, "You will go to hell." He says, "I'm ready to go to hell as long as it can deliver everybody. This mantra is for the deliverance of everybody." So we see that in the lives of over and over devotees again. It's as long as I'm able to assist others to move forward in their shelter of the devotional service. I don't care what happens to me. I'm ready to suffer or I'm ready to just be here, but push everybody to move forward in their devotional service. So that's the aspect of bhakti and mukti that Srila Prabhupada is talking here. So, so from that standpoint, it's like bhakti stands so far high that there's no competition from bhakti, because that's the selfless expression of even surrendering our free will, and that's what Kapila Dev is also telling here, and that's what Srila Prabhupada is also kind of trying to. He also gives examples of Bilva Mangal Thakur, where that famous prayer that we know. As long as like I'm performing devotional service, Mukti Devi is standing right in front of my door, ready to do whatever I want. And I think I don't remember the exact personality, but when they were getting onto the chariot of Vaikunta, they actually stepped on the liberation and then gets on the Vaikunta. It's like the physical representation of Mukti Devi, kind of crushing Mukti Devi as you're trying to, for lack of better term, like my verbiage is not, my vocabulary is not good. So crushing is not a correct word, but it's like you're in some ways saying Mukti Devi, you're amazing, but all I'm trying to take shelter of Bhakti Devi. So as I'm stepping there, sorry, and Mukti Devi is happy if somebody is kind of she's ready to, as Bilu Mangal Thakur says, is always ready to do whatever I ask. So she might be taking that position of maidservant, but she's still far higher from where we are. But she understanding Mukti Devi, understanding the position of Bhakti Devi in the heart of Krishna, she's ready to do anything that requires her to assist the devotees to perform their devotional service. Um, so that's the first aspect. I think considering that today is Saturday, I think we can go a little more. There was this. Um, so there's a couple of more points that I wanted to discuss, and then we'll discuss and we'll call it. So that's the first aspect that Srila Prabhupada is talking here, is the comparison of bhakti and mukti. And then Prabhupada also kind of compares, then expands further into the actual point that Kapila Dev is telling here, is how devotional service helps us get rid of the subtle body, just as fire in the stomach digests all that we eat. So in that context, there's a story that I recently heard, which I felt kind of quite fits into the specific points that we wanted to discuss. Is this story was recently is this story actually comes from one of the Upanishad, Chandogya Upanishad, and and apparently Prabhupada also refers to this, not exactly to this verse, but one of the verse that comes during this narration in the Chandogya Upanishad in multiple purports of Bhagavad Gita that he writes. So the story goes on like this, where one of the sages, the sage's name was Uddalaka. This sage was talking. He has a son. The son's name was Swetaketu. So the Swetaketu was getting trained by Uddalaka, and he comes to a point where he understands and almost memorizes the whole of Vedic Upanishads, everything that is there in Vedas. He's able to uh, recite the verses from whichever specific corners of Vedas that Uddalaka was asking. But Swetaketu, as he's preparing, as he's studying, gets this question that how does the digestion system work? And then Uddalaka says that as there's a digestive fire in our body, and as he then gives the explanation of as as we all see through the process, there's a specific process where the milk eventually turns into ghee. So there's a huge process where the milk kind of gets into a different form, then gets into the form of butter, and then gets into the form of ghee, which we call it as clarified butter. So similarly, our digestive system, where there's a fire in our digestive system, the digestive system, the fire, whatever food that we are eating, kind of consumes it and then passes it into our body as different nourishments that we need. Then Swetaketu says, I still can't understand. Can you please explain it to me in much little deeper way? Then Uddalaka says that so every food that we eat has three components. One is the gross food component that we have, and the other is the water component, and the other is the fire component. Acharyas comment the fire component as not being the fire on which the food is cooked, but the fiery aspects of the food, like the butter or ghee or oil in which the food is cooked. So that's the fire aspect of it. So Uddalaka says that our digestive system, like with anything, any aspect that we see, there is a gross part of it, and there is the subtle part of it, and there is the actual substance or the core substance of it. Like in our case, there is a gross body, and there is a subtle body, and then the core, the subtlest of all, which is the spirit soul, which is us. So Uddalaka says that similarly for food also there is the gross, and there is the medium part, which is the subtle part of it, and then the subtlest part of it. So when we consume the food, our digestive system consumes the food. The grossest part of the food becomes the excreta, which is otherwise called a stool, and the subtle part of it becomes our flesh. And the subtlest of all, the food that we eat, the subtlest of all is which will eventually becomes the mind. And that is why we all understand when our acharyas explain that what we eat becomes us. It is because based on the digestive system eventually transforms the food that we are eating into mind. So based on the consciousness that we are putting into the food that we are cooking, that in internally affects our consciousness, because it internally becomes our mind. And then he says, we coming to the water, the grossest part of the water that we are drinking becomes urine, and then the subtle part of it becomes our blood, and the subtlest part of it becomes our life air. And finally, the fire, which is the fiery aspects of the food, which is the butter, ghee, or oil. The gross part becomes the bone, the subtle part becomes the bone marrow, and the subtlest of all becomes the speech. So that's why it is told. There's obviously no, might not, maybe there is some research into Ayurveda, but from the place where I come, they say the Brahmins who traditionally have consumed a lot of ghee and all of that, um, their speech, the power of their speech is quite high. Where it's also told, if you want to kind of refine your speech, consume ghee. So that's how Uddalaka says that that's how our body kind of breaks down. And there's Svetakaritu still doesn't get it. Then Uddalaka says, okay, for next 15 days, do not consume the food, but only drink the water. And after the end of the 15 days, Svetaketu comes back, and then he's only drinking water. He's not eating any food for 15 days. Svetaketu comes back, and Uddalaka then says that, okay, now can you recite the verses? That you're so famous for reciting the verses. When he wants to recite the verses, Swetaketu just can't remember any verses because the food that eventually should have kind of transformed into the mind was not consumed for 15 days. So that's why the memory part of it, where his ability of consuming, reciting the verses kind of was vanished. But because he was consuming the water, which became his life, where he was still nourished. Then Uddalaka says that now you go back, have food, and then come back. So Swetaketu goes back, eats food, and once he's fully nourished and all of that, then he comes back. And then Uddalaka then says, Swetaketu, now can you recite the verses? Then the moment Uddalaka says that, Swetaketu then goes on reciting the verses. And that's when Uddalaka says that this is how there is a specific process that the Lord has given in our body, which is called, which in our terminology, we call it as digestive system. But there's a fire. Anything that we eat through this way that I have explained breaks down, and that's how you're nourished. And then Swetaketu understands it, and then he goes on. So why are we discussing from the context that we are trying to discuss is is in two ways. One is just the process of digestion, right? So as we just understood that there is a process of digestion that happens where the food that we are eating, the gross part becomes excreta, the subtle part becomes flesh, and the subtlest of all becomes the mind. So during the digestion, the digestive fire that we have is able to, for lack of better term, differentiate between the various aspects of food that we have. Okay, it understands, okay, this is the grossest part of the food that this person has eaten, and this can go out as stool. And this is the subtle part of it, which needs to go into his flesh. And the subtlest part of it eventually needs to go into the mind. So there is the fire, the digestive fire is able to kind of, through the process of digestion, is able to differentiate and kind of pass on the required streams. When it comes to water, okay, the gross needs to become the urine, the subtle needs to become the blood, the subtlest of all needs to become the life air. So goes on for the, so it's not only able to differentiate between this, the gross, subtle, and subtlest aspects of the specific item, but it's also differentiating between the different kinds of food that we are eating. Either should it be categorized as food, or should it be categorized as water, or should it be categorized as fire? So based on that, during it just so happens, right? Naturally, we were just eating and we are getting nourished. So through this process, the body is kind of differentiating, and then it kind of breaks it down and then passes on to the specific aspects of the body of the nourishment that we had. So our Acharya has explained that similarly, bhakti also destroys when uh, when Kapila Devi is explaining, devotional service dissolves the subtle body. So as the food, as our digestive system is dissolving everything that we have and then passing on to the nourisher or nourishing part of the body, bhakti also dissolves everything that we are kind of consuming and then destroys the bad portions of it, which in this case is the grossest part of it and the subtle, as it is explained, the gross body that we have and the subtle body, the subtle body that we have are kind of in in our understanding kind of destroyed. But the destruction happens not through the kind of crushing or kind of the traditional understanding of definition of destruction, but how our acharyas explain is the destruction happens by invoking the spiritual sense objects that we have. And through this process of devotional service, that's why when we say that when we speak of in the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is said that the bodies of inhabitants of Vaikunta are completely spiritual, having nothing to do with the material body, senses, or life air. And expanding onto that, we also there say that the body of an acharya is also spiritual. He might be still be in that same material body in comparison to what we have, but even being so, the body has become completely spiritualized. How it happens is like as through the process of digestion, how the food is kind of getting transformed and is being circulated to different ones. So our acharyas also explained that bhakti destroys the bad portions by actually developing the actual spiritual sense objects, and ultimately through that process the spiritual body becomes available for the devotee. So even though, so through the process of devotional service, as happens in the cross in the basis of digestion, ultimately what we have of the gross and subtle body kind of gets destroyed, and the spiritual sense body and the sense objects are developed. Ultimately the spiritual body just comes up. And then the second part, so one part of it is actually the process of digestion. And then, as Uddalaka explained, is the process of digestion. And next comes, okay, now you're telling me that, like with any science experiment, right? So there is a process that happens. And once you see the process, you kind of can create a mind map. Okay, this is the first thing that I did. When I mixed this with this, the reaction came as this. And when I did this to this reaction, this is. So you can kind of create a mind map of that. So can similar mind map, or can similarly we can create a logic of the flow of the what happens. So if we kind of, as Uddalaka was also explaining, there is no specific logic or map of how the digestive system works can be created. How do you explain, like it just so happens so naturally in our body, as you're eating, I consume the food. There is some process in my body, which we call it as digestive system or the digestion fire, transform what I'm eating. It is able to determine in it's like the real life. Right now, the whole thing of is the AI reciprocation that we have it, right? It's like the real time processing that happens. I'm eating, and then the gross is getting transformed, and everything is happening. So it's difficult just in the process of devotional service, just in the process of digestion also, it's difficult to kind of exactly explain how it is getting transformed. So in this case, I remember one of the stories that I've heard this quite long back. So this story goes on like this. It happened in UK. It's a real story. So there is this church priest, a pastor, who used to write these newsletters and send it to the distribution that was seeking for it. And then in one of the newsletter, he explains the importance of hearing. And then he sent out. And then in response, one of the person who is an atheist says that, writes back to him saying that he was at one point a staunch believer in God and all of that, but eventually he became an atheist. So he says that for a long time, I've gone to church every day. I've heard what my pastors were saying. I've read everything that is there to be read, but it didn't help me in life. Ultimately, I just lost everything, and then here I am, not trying to find. And when there is no value in what I'm trying to hear, then what should I? Why should I hear? So this the letter comes to the pastor, and then he starts thinking, and then he replies back. He says that for last 30 years, every day I'm eating. My wife cooks some delicious foods. I eat breakfast every day, then I eat lunch, then I eat dinner. But for the last 30 years of my life, I've initially it was my mother, then my family. Sometimes I cook myself, but I'm eating almost 3 times a day, every day for the last 30 years. But now, if you ask me, tell me, how is it that helping you in how, or if you tell me that, okay, now on the fifth birthday, on the fifth year of your life, on the 22nd day, what is the food that you have eaten? Or how is it that the food that you have eaten way long back is helping you? I can't exactly explain you. But the fact that I'm sitting here right now and writing this letter to you means the nourishment and the survival. I'm only able to survive because of the food that I've eaten. So similarly, sometimes it so happens that we might not be able to exactly explain the logic of why it happens or how it happens, but in similar ways, the fact that we are sitting here currently today and discussing about these amazing aspects of the process of devotional service, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Chandogya Upanishad, and so on and so forth, is to the fact of that there is some nourishment that is happening with whatever we are trying to do. So similarly, bhakti also liberates a devotee who is performing. Our acharyas explain that bhakti also liberates a devotee who is performing this chanting and hearing every day without striving ever for liberation at all. That's not even there in his head or her head. But ultimately, the devotee gets liberated. How it happens? It just happens. There is Even the devotee cannot know it, how it happens. And I'm sure all of us can vouch for it, because just the fact that I'm currently sitting here and discussing certain aspects that are way beyond my understanding, but just being sitting here and able to kind of learn by sharing that here is a fact that there is some magic that is happening behind. And we call that magic as causeless mercy in the case of devotional service. And in the case of digestion system, we call it as digestion, right? So there's that process of digestion and the logic of digestion. And interestingly, in Kishore Kishorik's calendar for this month, there is a quote that was written at the end of the calendar. It says, if you are indeed interested in logic and argument, kindly apply it to mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. If you do so, you'll find it strikingly wonderful. So if you want to kind of, sometimes, yes, logic and argument are needed. We don't want to be in that um, category of followers where we're just accepting because it says so. There are certain places where you need to apply logic and argument, but certain places, like in the case of digestion, you just can't apply logic. You're you can only understand it because of the input that was going on and the output. You're eating, so you're nourished. You don't eat, you fast for 5 days, then you'll see you're kind of not nourished. So similarly, the process of bhakti or the process of devotional service or the process of sadhu sangha is like that. There's no logical map or mind map that you can create. Okay, because today I met this devotee, or I met, sometimes it so happens that there is this, we might meet a devotee and a certain devotee, or kind of went into, um, walked into a seminar, and we feel, oh wow. So it's similar to digestion. We walked in, there is an input that we gave, and the output is quite prominent. But what happened internally, how did it all work out? It's almost impossible to tell. It just happens. If we can kind of use that verbiage of it just happens, like it just happens, by the mercy of the digestive system, it just happens. We are getting nourished. So similarly, by the mercy of the devotees and the Lord Himself, through the causeless mercy, we cannot exactly trace. It just happens, and we are sitting here right now. So this verse, this statement of Srila Prabhupada is actually from Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adilila chapter 8, verse 15 purport. So if you're indeed interested in logic and argument, kindly apply it to the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. If you do so, you'll find it to be strikingly wonderful. Yeah, like it's amazing, right? Prabhupada phrases it. It's not just wonderful, it's strikingly wonderful. So sometimes, like as I was preparing to this class, some of the stories that I've heard, like just the story of the 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 Christian pastor and the letter. I think I've heard this story way back, maybe 15 years back. But I don't know how it's as Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita. He, at the time of need, he gives us the memory and the power of memory and the power of forgiveness. How did I remember that story to be presented as part of this discussion? This like, it's not that I have a big books of stories and I went through all the pages. Yeah, this is the story that's exactly fits well to the point that we want to discuss. Nothing like that. I was meditating, I was contemplating on what should be the thing, and just like that, it comes into the memory. Oh, yeah, this is such an amazing story that we can think. So it so happens all through our life, certain things just happen just like that. And why is that happens? It just because maybe there's something that you're doing, right? In the case of digestion, you're surviving because you're putting the food into your mouth. So there is certain part of it that you're doing. So similarly in bhakti also, there's certain things that we ought to do, as acharyas are explaining. When a devotee is daily performing the chanting and hearing, but they're not striving for the liberation, but they gets liberated. So similarly, there's certain things that we are doing. There's this um, the certain credit, if we can take, is just the physical aspect of doing it. But there's no way that we can take the credit for the end result of why it happens or how it happens. It just happens. So, so on this space, there's if you want to just discuss on the causeless mercy, there's this like just the entirety of our lives. And every story that we can think of is an expression of that causeless mercy. Um, why did um, like everything like causeless mercy, right? Like Jagai Mother is a causeless mercy. Our own lives are causeless mercy. Every page, like every story is a causeless mercy. But there's one story that I wanted to discuss, and we'll end after this. Is the story of Narottam Das Thakur and the two son and the two of his disciples. So one day, Narottam Das Thakur was walking with his closest friend, Ramchandra Kaviraj, and they were walking, and then they see these two young boys were herding the goats. And Narottam Das Thakur and Ramchandra Kaviraj immediately understand that they're herding the goats because eventually these goats are going to be sacrificed at the altar of Mother Durga, and that's why they are taking care of the goats. And it pains the heart of Narottam Das Thakur and Ramchandra Kaviraj. And it pains their heart for the goats, and also it pains their heart for the two young boys who are kind of just in that age are kind of engaged by their father in such a cruel act of eventually killing the goats. So they want to kind of help these two young boys. So they don't know what to do. So they're just talking in a loud voice where the boys like they're not too close to the boys, not they are too far, but they start talking in a little louder voice where they start discussing, saying they want to sacrifice these goats at the altar of Mother Durga. But even Mother Durga doesn't want it. Even Mother Durga is not happy with the sacrifice. She wants everybody to perform devotional service. And then they just start discussing the philosophy and all of that. And just by the discussion and obviously the mercy that was flowing out of the heart of Narottam Das Thakur and Ramachandra Kaviraj, it just attracts the heart of these two boys. The two boys' name was Harinam Das and Ramakrishna Das. It was different names before, and then they immediately walk towards Narottam Das Thakur and Ramachandra Kaviraj, and then they say that we want to let go of everything that we are doing. We want to take your shelter, and each of them takes initiation from Narottam Das Thakur and Ramachandra Kaviraj, and they are given the name as Harinam Das and Ramakrishna Das. And eventually, they become such a prominent uh, propagators of devotional service that they go and even defeat their own father, who was Shivananda Acharya, who was a prominent Mayavada philosopher. So this Shivananda Acharya was so prominent that there was nobody who could defeat him in the Mayavad philosophy. But these two young boys, who their only strength was the mercy of Narottam Das Thakur and Ramachandra Kaviraj. And after initiation, they just walk in and defeat Shivananda Acharya, and like eventually they go on and defeating multiple other Mayavad philosophers. So it's like here is a logically doesn't make sense. Here is Shivananda Acharya, who is father of these young boys, which means he's a much more learned, experienced person. And in some ways, as a father, you understand how your children think. It's not that he's facing these two people, two boys, Harinam Das and Ramakrishna Das, for the first time. So he kind of can relate to how his sons think and what arguments that they can come up with. But even after that, everything was going for Shivananda Acharya. It's like the David and Goliath story that we all know. Everybody thought Goliath is going to win, but ultimately David won. In this case, Shivananda Acharya was like the Goliath. He was supposed to win. He was this big Mayavad philosopher who had this understanding of Vedas and everything. And here comes these two young boys, Harinam Das and Ramakrishna Das. Their understanding of Vedas was what their father has given. But now, all the strength that they are getting is the mercy of Narottam Das Thakur and Ramachandra Kaviraj. They just walk in and defeat Shivananda Acharya. How can you explain that? How does somebody's mercy defeat the logical explanation of being in this higher position? How did David defeat Goliath? How did Harinam Das defeat Ramakrishna Das and Shivananda Acharya? How did each of us who were somebody else at one point are right now in this position of being able to appreciate this amazing literature of Srimad Bhagavatam? the only answer is causeless mercy. Like how the only answer is how the digestive system kind of digests everything that we are eating. It just is. So similarly, it just the causeless mercy. Um, so it is yes important to kind of see the scriptures and the stories in the best way that we can understand, but ultimately it just is. Um, as as is explained in Ramayana also, anytime the Ramayana had to take a turn, Valmiki Acharya says, it so happened. Why did it happen? It just so happened because the Lord wanted it to happen. Why did Jaya Vijaya take birth as in that cruel bodies of Hiranyaksha trying to, like it just so contrasting, as I was also explaining, that if you think of from the personality of Jaya Vijaya to the personalities that are there, everything that Jaya Vijaya was standing for, these six personalities were breaking it. Hiranyaksha, just trying to exploit Mother Earth for the gold. Hiranyakashipu, trying to not only exploit everything, but also trying to be cruel to his own father. Ravana and Kumbhakarna, trying to exploit the same mother that they were worshipping. Um, Shishupal and Dantavakra, Shishupal wanting to marry same Mother Rukmini, and like the same Lord who he was glorifying, like who he always thought that I can never glorify him enough. He's sitting there and from the day one of his birth just blaspheming the same Lord, like just thinking of being in that position. It's not only of being enemy of the Lord, but just by that being in that position of standing for everything which I like, standing against everything that I hold dear to my life as the actual personality, but being there just because the Lord wants me to be there. Like it's baffling. So all we can at the end of the day is just say thank you, my dear Lord, for giving us access to these wonderful personalities as we are going through our journey, and just taking shelter and strength from them. I think that's all we can do. I'll end it here. If there is any corrections or comments, more Lila Prabhu. Thank you so much for joining. If not, then I think we can end it here. Do you want to add anything? Okay, we'll end it here. Thank you so much, Prabhu, once again.
Prabhuji,
Vancha.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Prabhu. I think I really loved the way you connected nourishment through the whole process of how subtle nourishment happens, and how bhakti also nourishes us. It was very insightful. Uh, in between, Chaitanya distracted me a little bit, but
Oh.
I want to go back and listen to the whole part again, Prabhuji. Really beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, no, Prabhuji. It's amazing. Thank you for putting so much, effort into it, and laying it out so nicely.
Hare
Yes,
Krishna.
Prabhu. Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yeah, we'll end it here. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyev cha patidanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Shri Prabhupada ki